A stunning breakthrough in one of Australia's most infamous unsolved crimes, the Wanda Beach Murders. It happened on a popular Sydney beach way back in 1965. Two teenage girls, Marion Schmidt and Christine Sherek, sexually assaulted, murdered and partially buried in the sand dunes. For a shocked nation, it was a loss of innocence. Who could commit such a crime? It's a question that's tortured investigators for more than 50 years. As Michael Usher reports, police had him and the courts let him go. Let him go to become one of the worst serial killers in modern history.
Absolutely, I was enchanted by him. A 16-year-old girl getting offered a modelling career. You know, I'm really interested in you. I think you have the look. And I thought, wow, this is fantastic. So I'm thinking catwalk, bright lights, cameras.
Fiona Parsons thought she was going to be famous. Approached out of the blue at Manly Beach by a charming, handsome fashion photographer.
I just thought, you know, wow, you know, I can't believe this is happening to me.
Fiona wouldn't be the only attractive teenage girl to fall under his spell.
He really presented well. I would have said that I met an articulate, intelligent, classy person.
Christopher Bernhard Wilder, the man in this grainy dating video.
I have what I call a need to meet and socialize on a more wider basis than I have been doing.
Will torture and abuse dozens of women.
I get put into the trunk of the car. He was electrocuting me, and he had superglued my eyes shut.
Wilder would become one of the world's most sadistic predators and a serial killer, preying on young women here and in America for over 2 decades.
There are very few people that have a brush with a serial killer like you've had.
I was just very lucky.
It all began here on Australian beaches.
We're talking an Australian serial killer which nobody's heard of, which is quite astonishing in itself.
He made #1 on the most wanted list with the FBI faster than anyone else in the United States.
Well, he was a true psychopath, a true narcissist, pure evil.
Pure evil that tonight we can trace all the way back to 1965 and to these Sydney sand dunes. We name Wilder as the #1 suspect in the shocking and unsolved Wanda Beach murders of 2 teenage schoolgirls.
He didn't just take your sister, did he?
He took my life away from me.
Marion Schmidt and Christine Sherek were not only neighbours in Sydney's West Ryde in 1965, they were best friends. The girls were more mature than their 15 years of age, and Marion, especially, often played the role of mum to her 5 brothers and younger sister.
She was a family girl, you know, she was the eldest of the girls and saw the role as assisting and nurturing the kids because it was a large family, 7, and my dad had died, you know, some 12, 18 months before. It was all hands to the deck and she took to it very, very well.
During the school holidays, it fell to Marion to help keep the kids entertained. So, on January 11th, 1965, Marion and her best mate Christine set off to Wanda Beach at Cronulla with the 4 younger Schmidt children.
And this was, it's obviously a different time and different era, but it was an easy thing to, just as kids, to jump on the train and get going to the beach for the day.
Different life. There was never any thought about, oh dear, somebody's going to come out of the bushes and grab you.
It was a nice sunny, warm January day. Once there, as the day progressed, the wind had really kicked in. Ultimately, we ended up huddling in a sand dune just to escape the winds.
But the shift in the weather wasn't the only change at the beach, according to Marion's younger brother, Peter Schmidt, who was just 10 years old when his sister took him to the beach that day. Peter recalls that after a while, something came over his sister and Christine. They began acting out of character, almost giddy with excitement.
But I'll read to you what you said in your police statement, which was Marion and Christine didn't sit down with us. They put all the towels that we had around us and said they would go on further. You said to Marion and Christine, "Where are you going?" And they said, both of them to me, "We're going mad." And they didn't say anything else. And that was the last you saw of them.
Yeah. Giggling.
Giggling.
Or laughing, yeah.
Which is unusual for these two girls. You know, they're smart, they're responsible, so something has drawn them down the beach on a not great day.
Criminologist Dr. Xanthi Mallet.
The weather's turning, but they've got a compelling reason to leave the siblings and go off down the beach giggling together. And that, to me, says it's a boy.
Where are you going later?
They were observed in the company of a youth about 16 years of age. They were seen to disappear with that youth into the sand dunes and were not seen after that time.
And, yeah, we waited. And waited, sadly. It seemed an eternity.
Peter Schmidt is just 10 years old, the eldest of the kids at the beach. It's getting dark, and this little boy is scared and confused.
By that stage, I think it was like 5 or 6 o'clock or something.
Peter takes charge and decides to leave the beach with his younger sister and brothers, aged 9, 8 and 5. He's hoping to find Marion and Christine at home.
In my mind, they were still going to come home. But, yeah, they weren't home, so I had to explain to the brothers what happened.
And somebody had said, "We've reported the missing to the police."
The girls are officially declared missing. New South Wales Police launch one of their largest ever searches. They'd never dealt with this before. 2 young girls who just vanished from the sand dunes.
There was a radio report that 2 bodies had been found, girls in a bikini. And I've gone, clearly not our 2 girls because they didn't have bikinis, they had one pieces. And then it all sort of just went bang. It's like a ton of bricks.
Here at Wanda Beach today, there is practically no trace of the tragedy which has shocked all of Sydney. Behind me, a short distance down the beach, a young man and his nephews yesterday stumbled upon the bodies of the 2 teenage girls from Ryde buried in a shallow grave.
For 2 young girls to be murdered in such a horrendous way, it shocked the whole nation. It really did.
Retired Detective Inspector Ian Waterson was in charge of the Wanda Beach cold case. He's re-examined every aspect of the girls' murders, including the 52 boxes of evidence and statements still stored in New South Wales Police archives.
What opinions did you form about the person who committed these crimes, the murderer?
Well, he's obviously quite vicious. He's killed one, the other one's tried to get away, and he's run after and murdered her.
But what's his motive for the actual crime in the first place, though? Is it sexually driven, or is it is it the violence, or...?
No, I think originally he's a sexual predator. Yeah, so I think that'd be his background. Rape was on his mind, and I think once he started, he just couldn't stop, and so now they were stabbed several times.
We feel that this man is a compulsive killer who must stab and have sexual intercourse with his victim as an overall part of the act.
It was frenzied and it was disgraceful. I mean, appalling. I mean, nearly severed the neck. So what sort of person is that?
We have been amazed and overwhelmed at the response the public have made. by the continued response of the people, we will be able to put our finger on the man who has committed this crime.
But that early optimism began to fade into despair. Despite the largest manhunt ever staged in New South Wales, leads were few and suspects non-existent. The killer had vanished. It would be 4 years before a suspect was named. And here it is. In an original police running sheet that we uncovered from 1969, Christopher Bernhard Wilder. A young surfie, a convicted sexual deviant, who just happened to be living in Ryde, a few kilometres from Marion and Christine. He was named in 1969, a few years after the Wanda Beach murders, by his wife at the time. She went forward to police because of his violence and sexual ways with her at the time.
Yeah, she realised what he was like as a person, and yeah, I think she was quite brave in coming forward and doing that, yes. He stands out far and above anyone else. Yeah, so that makes him a red-hot suspect in my eyes.
But despite the tip-off that police had been desperate to find, they were flat-footed and take 8 months to properly investigate Wilder, seen in this home movie. Had they acted straight away, they would have discovered that Wilder was on the radar, accused of rape at Manly, even interviewed by local police. But the Wanda detectives didn't pick up on that and missed their chance to interview Wilder, who, it turns out, was a dual Australian-US citizen and had fled to America. The case is marked suspended. In your mind, having reviewed this, who is the #1 suspect?
In my mind, it'd be Christopher Wilder, because there are so many, I guess, sides to this guy that point to his sexual deviance, his propensity for violence. He was around in Sydney at the time, hung around the beaches.
That all points to Wilder.
Points to Wilder, yes.
Incredibly, the Schmidt family were never told of the lead about Chris Wilder. For 53 years, they've longed for a breakthrough, but this is the first time they've seen Christopher Wilder named as an official suspect.
You are.
What is your reaction to that?
Bullshit. That's crap. What did the cops do?
It took them months to even follow it up.
No, that's even worse. Wife goes to the cops, and the cops do nothing for 8 months. I just can't believe that. That's ridiculous.
Wilder was gone. The #1 suspect had slipped the net of Australian investigators. As you'll see, in America, Wilder was not lying low.
Okay, name is Chris Wilder. Been in Florida approximately 11 years, originally from Sydney, Australia.
Chris Wilder looking for love in a 1981 dating video in the United States.
Between the ages of approximately 14 and 24 when I left Sydney, I was heavy into surfing. That was my sole gain in life. I want to date. I want to socially meet and enjoy the company of a number of women.
Having skipped Australia in 1969, Florida is now Wilder's playground. During the 1970s, he reinvents himself as quite the man about Miami and is a successful building contractor. What was his identity? What was he known for?
Playboy and the car racing and the high-risk sports.
In late February, Wilder drove car number 51 in the Miami Grand Prix.
Dana Neighbours and her husband Tom knew Chris Wilder socially during the early 80s. Tom was the local sheriff, and Dana ran a business that made the suits Wilder wore, racing his Porsches.
I like sports cars, done a little bit of motor racing, haven't done it in recent years, but I keep a couple of what you would call fancy cars at home.
The way you describe him, it sounds as if he had an incredible amount of charm.
Oh, he did. He did. Between the charm and the personality, he would go to the beach and he would go to malls and pick up women and so on, which always amazed me because he didn't strike me as the type that would have to pick anyone up. Anyone would voluntarily go with him. He was very attractive. He was witty. He had always seemed to have plenty of money. And he was very personable.
What Dana didn't know was his history of sexual assault in Australia and a growing list of sex crimes in Florida he kept well hidden. Now, these are documents from the FBI about his sexual criminal record in the 1970s.
Okay, so we've got 1 in 71 disorderly conduct, for which he was fined. Then we have 1 in 76, again in Florida, sexual battery. So he's upping the ante at this point. This is now sexual violent behaviour. And then in 80, we've got West Palm Beach, again, sexual battery with physical force. So, you know, he's really showing his colours at this point. He's obviously a violent sexual predator.
For that sexual battery charge, Wilder was on a 5-year probation, court-ordered to see a therapist and strictly monitored. But somehow, he convinces a US judge to grant him a travel permit to Australia. He touches down in Sydney on December 6, 1982. The very next day, Wilder drives to Manly Beach, but surfing and swimming are not on his mind.
It was a beautiful summer's day, and my father dropped me off down at the Corso.
16-year-old Fiona Parsons is arriving at her part-time job.
You'd stepped out of Dad's car on the way to work and he's targeted you straight away.
Straight away. Straight away. He would have seen me get out of the car. I was still waving at my father when Christopher Wilder came up to me.
Wilder, a complete stranger, turns the charm on immediately.
Oh, he was tall, you know, very tall to me. He had jewellery on. He had an accent. He was, fancy.
He flatters Fiona, telling her how attractive she is. He wants her to model.
He goes, you know, I'm really interested in you. I think you have the look. And I guess I had great big Bambi eyes and thought, wow, this is fantastic. And he offered me, right then and there, $100 to come and work for him.
Barely 24 hours back in the country, and Wilder has snared his first prey.
So we went back to his car and he opened the boot. He had a great big black camera bag in the boot, very fancy camera equipment. We went over to the beachfront and he wanted to take some photos of me. And then all of a sudden he was dominating.
Fiona is about to experience Wilder's Jekyll and Hyde personality.
He just started changing. And he got very forceful in his tone. And it's weird. It was like I couldn't get away from him from that point. I was stuck.
Completely stuck and under Wilder's spell.
I often wonder how I got in the car. How did I get in the car? He started asking me really strange questions of, do you have a boyfriend? Are you a virgin? I'll put you on a lie detector test. I knew I was in not a good situation, so I was talking a lot. I talked a lot about my parents, my family, and he also said he wanted to meet my parents. He wanted to sign a contract with them.
Wilder takes Fiona shopping, coercing her into trying on swimsuits and pantyhose. For reasons she still can't understand to this day, Fiona returns to his car and they head back to Manly Beach.
He wanted me to go up to other girls and introduce him to the other girls. But at this point, I don't think I was actually talking. I was pretty much under his spell, completely manipulated.
You're recruiting for him?
Yeah. Yes. went up to a particular girl I remember. She was so beautiful. Anyway, I remember walking up to her and saying to her that I'm a model and I work for this man and he wants to take photos of you. She went with him and she came back in tears, and he had asked her to take her top off, which I believe she did. And I left and I went looking for him. And it's funny, I think, why did I do that for? You know, I was away from him.
That was your chance to get away from him.
It was my chance to get away, you know.
But you went looking for him.
I went looking for him. And then I realised he had actually left, and I felt abandoned. I felt like I was, that he'd left me, that I wasn't good enough, I guess.
Fiona reports the whole incident to police. There's an alert out. But Wilder returns to Manly Beach just 3 weeks later. He uses the same routine to lure two 15-year-old girls into his rental car. The Jekyll and Hyde in Wilder reappears. He drives them around the northern beaches. Then to his King's Cross hotel room, the girls are blindfolded. For some time, they're assaulted. However, police weren't far behind. They were looking for his rental car, astutely identified by the girls' friends at the beach. When police swoop on the hotel, Wilder had released the girls and is alone.
Christopher Wilder was arrested and charged with kidnapping and sexually assaulting two 15-year-old girls.
They were so innocent, those girls. They were just so innocent. As I was. I was just very lucky that, you know, nothing happened to me.
Wilder is finally before a court. But to everyone's surprise, at his committal hearing on assault and kidnapping charges, the judge grants him bail.
At first, Wilder's passports were confiscated, but then in January 1983, the terms of bail were changed and Wilder was allowed to leave Australia.
Wilder has his ticket to freedom. His passport returned, he flew straight back to the United States. Few could have known that Wilder's sociopathic obsession with young women was about to become uncontrollable.
This is a new change in myself, hopefully. I'd like to social date more so. I have what I call a need to meet and socialize on a more wider basis than I have been doing.
Whoever that Christopher Wilder was in the dating video, the one that now returns to America is on a mission to feed his desires. Again, two young girls are in his sights. Not far from his home at Boynton Beach in Florida. They're sisters, just 10 and 12 years old.
Well, two young girls were just walking down the sidewalk, and a man driving a white El Camino pulled a gun on them, opened the door, ordered them into the car, and he drove them into the western county area, which was very desolate, found a deserted dirt road, and laid out a tarpaulin and brutalized the girls for a considerable amount of time.
Despite their horrific ordeal, the young girls survived. But it wouldn't be until much later, well after Wilder's name made headline news, that he was identified as the sisters' attacker.
And you're of no doubt that that was Chris Wilder responsible?
I have no doubt. His blood type came back as matching, and I put his photo in a photographic lineup with other suspects, and both of the girls went immediately to him.
It was him. It was Wilder.
No doubt.
It certainly matches almost identically to what he did in Australia.
Did in Australia, yeah, which I had...
Two girls from a beach, twice.
Yes, he was an animal.
He is Christopher Wilder, a man the FBI calls extremely active and very dangerous.
Tom Neighbours now finds himself in a predicament. He's the sheriff assigned to investigate the case, but he and his wife Dana are in shock to learn their friend Chris Wilder is the monster who attacked the girls.
I called her and I said, look, the FBI's looking for Chris Wilder. I'm on my way to a meeting. I said, go get your gun. Keep it handy.
He said, if Chris comes to the front door, shoot him.
While police searched for Wilder, only he knew his motives. The clock was ticking. The trial in Australia was imminent. But there was no way Wilder was coming home to face justice. He packs up and flees his Florida home.
I have the impression that he knew his days were numbered.
John Hanlon is the lead FBI investigator heading up the manhunt. He's on Wilder's tail.
Everywhere he goes, somebody dies.
Wilder is on the run. He heads north on open highways through the wild Everglades toward the state border.
I was a 19-year-old sophomore at Florida State University. He came up to me in the store and asked me if I was interested in being a model, and I said no. I had a boyfriend who wouldn't like that very much, and I didn't shave my legs. I was a surfer and wasn't really interested in modeling.
Linda Grober has never told her story publicly.
And he had followed me out to my car, so that's when things kind of unfolded, and that's when I got nervous.
And how would you describe who that person was in that moment?
Possessed, driven, focused, certainly. I think he sucker punched me in the solar plex, and I woke up and was in his car. And I get put into the trunk of the car, which was my sanctuary, quite frankly, for a long time. So he put me in the trunk of the car. We spent the next 10 hours, 12 hours driving around. It got cold, it was raining. He played these songs over and over from the Eurythmics. I just sort of, in my mind, you know, decided to spend a lot of time waiting for somebody to come get me, you know, waiting for Superman or God or whoever. I struggled initially with them, and then I was a very compliant person until I wasn't.
Wilder eventually pulls into a motel and smuggles Linda into the room inside a sleeping bag. They've crossed from Florida into Georgia.
I know I'm in a room with brick walls, which didn't work in my favor.
I know it's very difficult, but are you comfortable detailing any of the things that happened in that room with him?
They're not good things. Yeah. He was an electrician, so he knew how to use electricity. And that was kind of the worst of it. And so he was electrocuting me. He had tied me up to an electrical outlet in both my pinkies and my toes, and he had superglued my eyes shut.
Wilder was obsessed with the 80s TV drama Dallas. He also liked dance and aerobic shows on TV. In between watching these in the motel room, he would torture Linda.
I actually had a tiny, tiny bit of a slit in one of my eyes that I could see. I was standing and he was looking over here at the television. He was on the bed, the television was over there. I was standing here, the wall was right here, and the door. He wasn't really paying attention to me at all, and I noticed that the electrical outlet to my electrical device was plugged in right there. So I yanked it out of the wall and threw it at him and went for what was like, you know, they have the little latch in the door. And I didn't make it. So then he was on me, and then we fought for who knows how long. And then he hit me over the head with a blow dryer. And, you know, head injuries bleed a lot. And so in that moment, I just thought, okay, just pretend like he killed you.
Gary, this is going to be your first real crisis.
I can't go through life without having to face a crisis. Mama sounded terrible. Bobby and Pam were on the left of range.
And I just laid back, and he was, you know, on top of me, and I just pretended that he'd actually knocked me out. And then I waited a second and just jabbed my fingers in his eyes and ran to the bathroom. Screamed for a minute, shut the door. And then pretended like I was dead.
Linda Grober is fighting for her life.
I just sat in the bathtub and waited. I thought that he was gonna try to get in, or, you know, shoot through the door.
Tortured, raped. She's broken free from Chris Wilder and barricaded herself in the motel bathroom.
I opened up the door.
Sue Ellen, where have you been?
I thought, shit, this is it. He's gonna be standing there with a gun or a knife, and I'm done. I'm either gonna die or I'm gonna get out.
She gathers one last burst of strength to break free.
I ran out, and he was gone.
Just disappeared.
Disappeared.
Linda stumbles outside to get help. Badly wounded, but alive.
We flew up there. We got up there at night, and she was still in the hospital. We showed her the photo lineup. She didn't bat an eye. Identified the guy right off the bat. That gave us the kidnapping case. That gave us what we really needed, you know, to jump in, you know, full force.
We were following him. He was using business credit cards for motels and meals and gas and whatnot. So we were following him, but there was always a delay of an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, and so we were always just behind him, but we could see that he was heading west.
They came so close to getting him so many times, and then he would snatch someone else.
We needed to catch this guy, because you knew as long as he's out there, people are dying in horrible, horrible fashion. And the sooner you get him, you're going to save somebody's life.
Linda Grober has survived, but 4 other women are dead or missing, presumed dead.
And this was happening quickly. Chris Wilder was moving fast.
Boom, boom, boom. Each day he was taking another victim.
Rosario Gonzalez, Colleen Osborne, Terry Wade Ferguson, and Beth Kenyon, who'd briefly dated Wilder. All beautiful young women and mostly aspiring models, which would lead Wilder to be dubbed the Beauty Queen Killer.
He was using the same MO, the modeling. He was preying on girls, you know, being approached by a decent-looking Australian with a good accent and with the smooth as they come.
Ken Whitaker is a private detective hired by Beth Kenyon's family.
So the heat is on, but in a way, he's almost flourishing.
Flourishing and flaunting. He's like flaunting, like, I'm out here. He didn't change his appearance. You know, most guys like that, they shave their head or they dye their hair. Did none of that.
So it is when Wilder turns up almost 4,000 kilometres away on the other side of the country in Las Vegas. He's randomly photographed, an anonymous face in the crowd at a beauty pageant. But he's really scouting his next victim, 17-year-old Michelle Kaufman, a young catwalk model who disappears that day and turns up dead in neighbouring California.
The last apparent abduction was at a Las Vegas shopping centre 4 days ago. 17-year-old Michelle Kaufman, who disappeared after entering a local beauty contest.
Oh, Lord, he's sitting there. Remember, he's got his hands crossed. I mean, he's a very casual guy, you know.
This is in the middle of his killing spree across America.
And the thing that drives you nuts is the word went out that the guy is kidnapping girls at major shopping malls where there's modeling shows.
The FBI says Wilder uses his photographic skills to attract female victims.
The common characteristic is they're young, they are attractive, and most of them have an interest in modeling and those type careers.
There he is, sitting there calm as a cucumber.
Calm, even though, as the FBI later learned, by now he's murdered 7 young women in his cross-country killing spree. Many lured from shopping malls, convinced they'd find fame with Wilder posing as a fashion photographer. It's early April 1984, and just when Wilder should have been in Sydney to face trial,
Christopher Bernhard Wilder. Christopher Wilder.
He's the 39-year-old race car driver and photographer.
his mugshot is being plastered all over US news bulletins.
We are looking for Wilder as a prime fugitive and probably at this period of time considered to be one of the most wanted fugitives for the FBI.
He's now the prime suspect in a string of abductions and at least one murder.
Detectives believe Wilder is heading for Canada.
The problem you have is he knows where he's going and you don't. Yeah. And you need a break.
The lucky break is coming. Wilder is moving fast and becoming erratic. He's back on the East Coast in New York State, where Sheriff Ron Spike gets a call from a local truck driver.
All of a sudden he saw this young girl, partly clothed, along the side of the road, not walking steadily, but sort of a stagger. And he pulled up and stopped, and she pled for his help. Help me, help me, she said. I've been stabbed.
Dawnette Wilt had been kidnapped and held captive by Wilder for 2 days. Stabbed and suffocated, Dawnette was dumped in these woods, barely alive.
She had taken part of her clothes, and she had tied them around her chest, trying to stop the blood from coming out of her chest wounds. She had 2 chest wounds.
Dawnette has saved her own life, but what she reveals shocks police. Wilder had an accomplice in the car, 16-year-old Tina Marie Risico, who'd gone missing from a mall in California a week earlier.
With her, it's almost like the Stockholm Syndrome is kind of what you think of, in that she had been manipulated mentally to be his servant, if you will.
And like Fiona Parsons back in Manly, Tina was under Wilder's control and helped him lure other young women like Dawnette, who somehow found strength to stagger clear of the woods just before Wilder returned.
He left her for dead. He came back to the car. Tina Marie said he got in, and then they drove for probably 10 minutes or so, and he decided to turn the car around and go back. And he went down into the woods, and she wasn't there. When he couldn't find her, when he come back to the car, Tina said that he was really in a panic. She's gone, and he knew that he could be in trouble.
This adds to his frenzy of hitting the road again.
I believe so.
Later that day, Wilder, with Risico at his side, claims his last murder victim, 33-year-old Beth Dodge, in her gold Pontiac Firebird. Wilder didn't want her, he wanted her car. He's on a supercharged dash for the Canadian border. But in one last curious twist, he spares the life of his accomplice, Tina Marie.
Just yesterday morning, Wilder dropped kidnapped victim Tina Marie Risico at Boston's Logan Airport. Risico flew to California, where she told police Wilder told her to go home, that he did not want her to see him die.
He told her that morning, I'm gonna send you home because I don't want you with me when this is over.
The Australian-born and bred Christopher Wilder is now America's most wanted man. And he's out of control. On the run for a month, a killing spree covering 12,000 kilometres. He's abducted and raped at least 13 women. 9 are dead or missing. But the law is about to finally catch up with Chris Wilder.
He went north then towards Canada. And he was in a little town called Colebrook, up near the Canadian border, when 2 New Hampshire troopers had saw this guy over by the gas station getting gas and was acting kind of hinky, so they went over there and approached him. And he made a dash to get back in the car to get his gun out of the briefcase. And in the tussle where they were trying to grab a hold of him there, he come out with a gun, and he actually fired off 2 shots. And one shot went through Wilder and then into the body of one of the troopers. And then the second shot was a direct shot into, Wilder shot himself right in the heart. And it killed him right there and then.
State police say they confronted Wilder at a gas station and that he shot himself.
But a nagging question is unresolved. Was it suicide or was it accidental?
Do you believe that Wilder was trying to kill himself or just retaliate?
He turned that gun on himself and did himself in right there. There's no doubt that if he could have done away with those 2 officers, he would have. So he took the position, I'm going to kill myself.
In the end, Chris Wilder, the Sydney-born serial killer, would take his own life rather than risk capture. He's officially listed as killing 9 young women. But what police here and America agree on is that the true tally of his victims, including those he raped and let free, will never be truly known. That some survived at all during his murderous spree is down to their extraordinary strength and courage.
I learned more and more about all the girls who didn't get a chance and decided that I was in many ways living on their behalf, that I needed to make sure that I did something worthwhile.
You do not want to see yourself as a victim of Chris Wilder.
I mean, I had a really bad day a long time ago, and he took that day from me. He's not going to take the rest of my life.
But for 2 young lives taken back on Wanda Beach in 1965 and their families, there's never been any dignity or truth. The harsh circumstantial evidence says Marion Schmidt and Christine Sherek were Chris Wilder's first murder victims. But the cold case in New South Wales hasn't been touched in a decade, and crucial evidence sitting in archives lies untested.
We're in the day and age of DNA solving so many unsolved crimes. Why hasn't DNA helped solve the Wanda Beach murders?
Well, I wouldn't say it hasn't yet. We're still working on it. We still have the girls' costumes. There's still a strong possibility, I'm hoping in the very near future, that it will solve the case for us.
I absolutely think they should go back to that clothing, back to those files, and if they can get any DNA, run it. You know, we've got a great shot at solving this. We're never going to have a better one. Technology is available. Use it. Let's see if we can't solve this at last.
For the families of the 2 young girls who were killed at Wanda Beach, they've never known who the killer was.
Yeah, and victims' families always say that to me. They just want to know what happened.
At Visium, Christ, we close it. At least for the rest of the family, they can get closure.
It was your mother's one wish.
It was.
And she never had that fulfilled.
No, she just wanted to understand why.